The stranger with no shadow. In the heart of the great savannah, where golden grass waved like an ocean in the wind and baobab trees stood like ancient sentinels, there lay the peaceful village of Doma. Life in Doma moved with the rhythm of the earth, quiet, slow, and steady. Children laughed as they chased goats, elders dozed under the trees, and the sky seemed to hum with contentment. Among the children was a girl named Abeni. She was not like the others. While most girls her age learned to weave baskets or grind millet, Abeni wandered the woods barefoot, listening to the whisper of the wind, learning the names of herbs from her grandmother, and singing to birds who seemed to sing back. She has the eyes of the old spirits, her grandmother often said, nodding wisely. That girl hears the land. But even the land, it seemed, had begun to whisper warnings. It started small. One night, the village dogs, usually a rowdy, barking bunch, fell silent. They lay curled up, eyes open, staring into the darkness. The wind whistled through the trees in strange patterns, carrying sounds that didn't belong. Some said they heard hissing. Others heard crying. The trees, too, had begun to move when there was no breeze. Their leaves rustled like old gossipers exchanging secrets. Then, one evening as the sun melted into the horizon, a woman came. She arrived with no warning. No sound of footsteps. Just appeared, walking from the direction of the river, her silhouette long and slender. Her skin was as dark and smooth as river stones, her hair long and braided with silver threads. But most unsettling of all, she cast no shadow. The village fires flickered, the sun still touched the sky, and yet, the earth beneath her feet remained untouched by darkness. Only Abeni noticed. The woman introduced herself softly. Nuru, she said, her voice like water trickling over stone. She smiled, but it never reached her eyes. She had no bags, no family, no past she would speak of. But she offered her hands to help, a woman alone, gentle, beautiful, calm. Chief Gamba, strong of will and proud of tradition, welcomed her. She has come at sunset, he said. A sacred hour. She is blessed. But Elder Zimo, oldest of the village, stood apart, watching her closely with narrowed eyes. Not all who walk with feet are truly human, he muttered under his breath. He was a man of riddles and stories, often dismissed by the younger ones as just the old scarecrow under the baobab. But his face that night was tight with worry. Abeni watched Nuru too. Something about her felt off. One evening, Abeni saw her standing by the river, staring into the water. For hours. She didn't move. Didn't blink. And when Abeni looked closer, Nuru's reflection moved differently than she did, tilting its head when she did not. The girl shivered, clutching her necklace of bone and seed. Her grandmother had given it to her for protection, she said. Until then, Abeni had thought it was just a pretty charm. The next few days, Nuru became a part of village life like she had always been there. When a baby grew ill with fever, she touched his forehead and whispered words no one understood. The fever broke before dawn. When a hunter returned with a broken leg, she placed her hand on the wound, and by morning, he walked without pain. She is a gift, cried the villagers. A spirit of healing. But not everyone felt peace. Chickens refused to lay eggs. The goats grew thin, their bones showing through their skin. The birds, those cheerful singers, vanished. The mornings were silent now, eerily so. Elder Zimo tried to warn the people again. She brings miracles, yes. But at a price, he said at the village meeting. The trees whisper of her. The river trembles. You feel it too. The balance is shifting. Chief Gamba waved him off. You see danger in your own shadow, old man. Let her be. That night, Abeni couldn't sleep. Her dreams were filled with strange shapes, coiled and slithering, and a voice that whispered her name in a language she did not know. When she woke, sweat clung to her skin, and the moon glowed bright as a silver drum. She decided she needed answers. She followed Nuru. She waited until the village slept, crept through the dark with feet as light as feathers, and slipped behind the stranger's hut. There, hidden behind a mound of logs, she waited. Time passed. The night was still. And then, a sound. A soft hiss. The door creaked open. Nuru stepped out, barefoot and calm. She moved with unnatural grace, gliding across the earth rather than walking. Her eyes, cold, moonlit, scanned the night. Abeni didn't dare breathe. Nuru walked to a tree stump and knelt beside it. She hummed, low and sweet. The melody was unlike anything Abeni had heard before, beautiful but sharp, like honey laced with thorns. Then, Nuru began to undress. Not in shame or secrecy, but like someone shedding a heavy coat. And when her skin peeled away, it wasn't fabric. It was skin. Layer after layer slid from her shoulders and back, revealing smooth, glistening scales beneath. Abeni's heart stopped. The woman who had healed the sick, who had made the villagers smile, now shimmered in the moonlight, not as a woman, but as something else entirely. Nuru, whatever she truly was, laid the long, pale snakeskin over a rock. It stretched as long as a canoe, coiled and cracked with fresh warmth. She stood tall, her eyes glowing faintly, and whispered into the wind. Then she turned. Straight toward Abeni. The girl gasped, but it was too late. Nuru's eyes locked onto hers, a knowing smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. But she said nothing. She simply smiled and slipped back into her hut. Abeni was frozen. Her feet refused to move. When she finally crawled forward and touched the snakeskin, it was still warm. Secrets beneath the skin. Ever since the night Abeni watched Nuru shed her skin, her world had felt different. The sky seemed darker somehow, even in the bright of day. The village buzzed with life, children played, fires crackled, the drummers practiced their rhythms, but for Abeni, everything carried a shadow that wasn't there before. The snakeskin she touched still haunted her. She hadn't told anyone, not even her brother Teo, about what she had seen. She kept it locked inside, like a secret too dangerous to say aloud. But the land was speaking. And it was not speaking kindly. The once green crops that danced in the breeze now withered under the sun. Yams came up soft and blackened, maize shriveled like old fingers. A bad season, Chief Gamba declared. The rain was late. It happens. But Abeni saw the patterns. This wasn't just nature being moody. The dogs had started howling again, not at wild animals, but at nothing at all. Chickens laid blood-specked eggs. And the trees, oh, the trees whispered like gossiping spirits in a language only the wind could carry. And through it all, Nuru thrived. Her presence in the village only grew stronger. Where once she walked quietly, now she held her chin high, her steps graceful and sure. People praised her. She healed the old, blessed the newborns. Even the chief began to call her the river's blessing. But Abeni saw more. She saw how Teo, her proud, fearless older brother, began to change too. Teo had always been the light of the village, known for his booming laugh and his love of wrestling goats. Don't ask, it's a thing. But lately, his laughter came less often. He spent long evenings near Nuru's hut, eyes full of questions and admiration. One evening, Abeni found him sitting alone by the fire. Teo, she asked softly, why are you always near her? He smiled, but it was a strange smile, like a mask. She understands things. Things about the world. About me. His eyes gleamed in the firelight. She says she dreams of returning to a place far below. A deep place. Full of quiet. She says she came from there long ago. Abeni shivered. That doesn't sound like a good place. Teo shrugged. Maybe peace is scary to those who've never known it. Ebony wanted to shout, Theo, she's not what she seems. She's something else, something wrong. But the words stuck in her throat. Even her own brother wouldn't believe her. That night, the wind howled louder than ever before. Ebony couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, the memory of the snakeskin curling around her thoughts like a living thing. And then, the hissing began. At first, she thought it was a dream. But it grew louder, more rhythmic. Not like a snake in the bushes. More like chanting made of hisses. High, low. High, low. It came from the woods. She got up, slipped on her sandals, and grabbed her grandmother's necklace, the one made of teeth and roots. For protection, her grandmother had once said. For when the earth sings in strange voices. She followed the sound into the trees. The moon was full, and the forest shimmered in silver light. The path was overgrown, as if it hadn't been walked in years. Vines seemed to twitch underfoot. Birds sat silently in the trees, eyes wide and unblinking. And then, she saw her. Nuru stood in a clearing. But she wasn't alone. Snakes. Hundreds of snakes, coiled at her feet, slithering around her ankles like living jewelry. They hissed in harmony, circling her in a spiral. And Nuru, she was singing. Not with words, but with sounds that pulsed with something ancient and heavy. Her skin began to ripple. Like water touched by a breeze. Slowly, scales appeared across her arms. Her fingers fused into claws. Her eyes glowed yellow, like lanterns in the night. Her body twisted, lengthened, stretched. She didn't become a snake, but she wasn't fully human anymore. Ebony gasped. A branch snapped beneath her foot. Nuru turned. But before she could step forward, the snakes turned too, hissing in warning. Ebony ran, heart pounding, legs burning. She didn't stop until she burst into Elder Zimo's hut, gasping for breath. The old man looked up from his incense bowl. I saw her, Ebony wheezed. She changed. She has snakes. Eyes like fire. She's not, she collapsed, the words stumbling over each other like frightened birds. Zimo didn't look surprised. He simply nodded. I know, child, he said. You know. He stirred the coals in his bowl. I've seen this before. Long ago. The serpent spirits are old. Older than fire, older than memory. They come wearing skin that looks like ours. But beneath, he pointed to the burning herbs. They hunger for souls. And sometimes, love. Ebony's voice trembled. We have to tell the village. Zimo looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. And say what? That their savior is a serpent in disguise. They would laugh. Or worse, call you cursed. But it's true. Child, he said gently, truth is dangerous when it's not believed. Ebony clenched her fist. So we do nothing. Zimo leaned closer. We watch. We listen. And when the moment comes, we act. But not before. That night, Ebony lay in her mat, her body shaking with fear and frustration. She wanted to run into the village square and scream the truth. But Zimo was right. They wouldn't believe her. Not when Nuru cured the blind and sang babies to sleep. She drifted into sleep, unwillingly. And then the dream began. She stood in the same forest clearing, moonlight washing over her. The snakes were gone. The trees were silent. Only Nuru remained, dressed in robes made of mist and ash. Nuru smiled at her, not kindly. Knowingly. I know you saw me, she whispered. Ebony's feet were frozen. Her voice trapped. Nuru stepped closer, her voice soft as a lullaby laced with poison. I don't like being watched, Ebony. But I understand curiosity. It's what led me to this village. What led me to Teo? Ebony tried to speak, to scream, to wake. Nothing. You think you understand what I am, Nuru whispered, brushing a cold finger across Ebony's cheek. But you know nothing of hunger. Of ancient things buried beneath the earth. I have waited a long time. She leaned in close, her eyes suddenly wide and glowing. And now, I wait for you. Ebony woke with a jolt, her pillow soaked with sweat, the morning sun just beginning to rise. But there, beside her bed, a single snake scale. Silver. And warm. The night of the blue fire. The village of Doma had always followed the moon. It marked the seasons, the planting, the harvest. It guided marriages, births, and even burials. But only the oldest of the old had heard of the blue fire moon, a rare and cursed celestial event when the moon burned with a strange blue glow, and the spirits of the earth were said to starve with hunger. And now, it was coming. And so was a wedding. Ebony could hardly believe her ears when Teo, her brave, handsome brother, stood before the village and announced, "I will marry Nuru on the night of the full moon." There was silence, then thunderous applause. The villagers cheered, danced, and embraced the news like rain after drought. "She has brought healing," one elder shouted. "She has brought blessings," said another. Even Chief Gamba wept with joy. Only two people didn't celebrate. Ebony, and Elder Zimo. "She has brought something, yes," Zimo muttered. "But it is not a blessing." That night, Ebony stood in Zimo's hut, the smoke of burning herbs curling through the air like ghost fingers. "She's going to marry my brother," she said, her voice shaking. Zimo nodded grimly. "That union will not be of love, but of sacrifice. She'll devour him." "Not just him," Zimo said. "All of us." There was a long silence. Then, the old man leaned in and whispered, "It is time to gather the old circle." Ebony blinked. "The what?" "The ones who once sealed another serpent, long before you were born. When the earth cracked, and blood rained from the sky. We fought back. We bound it. I thought that was just a story." Zimo gave her a look. "All stories are true. Especially the ones people forget." The next day, Zimo left the village quietly. Ebony helped by keeping watch while he visited 3 old, nearly forgotten homes on the outskirts. From one, a blind woman with hands covered in symbols. From another, a man who walked with a bone cane but whose eyes saw too much. From the third, a twin-sister duo who hadn't spoken to each other, or anyone, in decades, but finished each other's thoughts. They formed the old circle once more. Meanwhile, Ebony worked on a plan of her own. She remembered her grandmother's words, "The roots of the ground know what the sky forgets." So, she dug deep into her grandmother's chest of charms and secrets. She found a satchel of dried roots, twisted, knotted, and black as coal. Bura roots, once used to ward off serpent spirits. And among the roots, a tiny scroll, barely a few inches long, with glyphs that seemed to shimmer when touched. "These will bind her spirit," Zimo explained when she showed them to him. "But only if she wears them willingly." Ebony nodded. "I'll make her a gift." She began to weave the roots into a necklace, simple, beautiful, and ancient in its power. She mixed the glyph into the knot at the center, where it would sit against Nuru's skin if she accepted it. The night of the wedding came. And so did the blue fire moon. The sky was clear, but the moon glowed not gold or silver, but blue. Not the soft blue of ocean or sky, but the cold, flickering blue of flames. It hovered above the village like an eye watching the world below, unblinking. The villagers gathered in the square, dressed in bright colors, humming wedding songs, drumming joyful rhythms. But beneath it all, the land was tense. The wind refused to blow. The earth held its breath. Ebony moved among them like a ghost. Teo stood near the village altar, beaming. Nuru stood beside him in a dress of moonlight and mist, her smile delicate, her presence overwhelming. Ebony approached, her heart thundering in her chest. "I made this for you," she said, holding out the necklace. "A gift from my family. A blessing." Nuru looked at her for a long moment. Then, she smiled. "Thank you, child." She placed the necklace around her own neck. And the ground trembled. Only slightly. Just a whisper of a quake. But Ebony felt it. And so did Zimo, standing at the edge of the square with the old circle, eyes watching, hands ready. The wedding began. The chief spoke the ancient words. The crowd clapped and danced. The moon watched from above, glowing brighter. Teo reached out, taking Nuru's hands in his. And then, the necklace glowed. Not a soft light, but a blinding, burning flame that exploded from the glyph at its center. Nuru gasped. Her body jerked once. Then she laughed. Not the warm, charming laugh the villagers knew, but a low, inhuman chuckle that sent chills down every spine. The lights faded. And Nuru was changing. Her skin began to ripple, crack, peel away. Scales burst through her flesh, black and glistening like oil. Her arms stretched, hands splitting into claws. Her mouth unhinged, revealing fangs as long as fingers. Her hair twisted into a crown of riding serpents. Teo stumbled back, screaming. Villagers froze in terror. And then, she rose. Tall. Massive. Monstrous. The air rippled around her as her voice boomed, not spoken, but felt in the chest like thunder. You welcomed me into your homes. You praised me, fed me, worshipped me. Now I take your hearts. Her body unfurled. A serpent queen of impossible size, her coils thick as tree trunks, her eyes glowing with ancient hunger. The villagers screamed and ran. Fires were knocked over. Drums silenced. Babies wailed. Teo tried to run, but one of her coils caught his ankle and lifted him into the air. Zimo and the old circle stepped forward, arms raised, voices chanting in the old tongue. Ebony stood in the chaos, unmoving. This was the moment. The moment they had feared, but also prepared for. The battle in the grove. The serpent screamed. Not with a voice made of breath and throat, but with a sound made of earth and flame. The sky pulsed with her fury, clouds scattering as if even they feared her wrath. The villagers ran in every direction, the wedding square now a battlefield. Nuru, no longer a woman, towered above them, her body a mass of coils, her skin black and gleaming like obsidian, her fangs dripping with venom that hissed where it touched the earth. And yet, in the middle of it all, Ebony did not run. She stood, heart pounding like a drum in her ears, but her feet rooted to the soil beneath her. All around her, chaos bloomed. But her eyes were on the binding stone, deep in the sacred grove at the edge of the village. That was where this had to end. To the grove. Elder Zimo shouted, the wind snatching the words from his throat. The old circle formed around him, limping, wheezing, but chanting words older than language. Their hands were marked with charcoal sigils, their feet bare to feel the pulse of the earth. Zimo grabbed Ebony's arm. You know the way, he said, eyes blazing with urgency. Lead them. That stone sleeps until called by blood and courage. Ebony swallowed the lump in her throat. She was just a girl. She wasn't ready. But she had to be. They ran. Through smoke and screams, through falling thatch roofs and twisted earth. Ebony led the villagers, those brave enough to follow, toward the edge of the forest, where the sacred grove of Ebel waited like a forgotten breath. Behind them, the serpent writhed, shrieking. Wherever Nuru passed, the ground cracked. Wells ran dry. Trees withered in seconds. The wind itself seemed to flee her path. As they reached the grove, the air changed. It was still, like the inside of a heartbeat. The trees were older here, taller, thicker, tangled with vines that whispered secrets when touched. The binding stone sat at the center of the grove, half buried and covered in moss. It pulsed faintly beneath the moonlight, like a sleeping heart. But it was silent. Why isn't it doing anything? Ebony gasped. Zemo limped forward, coughing violently. He placed his hands on the stone, whispering in a language Ebony didn't know. His voice cracked with age and fear. She's too strong, he whispered. She's tied to something deeper. Older. Then untie her, Ebony begged. Zemo looked at her, eyes softening. You must, child. What? I am too old. My spirit is spent. But yours is still rooted. He drew a knife from his cloak. Not a weapon, but a ceremonial blade, carved with ancient glyphs. He placed it in her trembling hands. When the time comes, bleed for the stone. And speak the name of the earth. Before Ebony could respond, the ground erupted behind them. The serpent had arrived. Nuru smashed into the grove like a living storm. Trees exploded into splinters. Roots lifted from the ground. Birds took to the sky screaming. She reared up, her body glowing with dark energy. Her eyes locked on Ebony. You run well, child, Nuru hissed. But nowhere is safe from me. The villagers scattered, hiding behind trees, rocks, anywhere. But Zemo and the old Seko stood firm, forming a ring around the binding stone. The serpent lunged. Zemo stepped forward and thrust his staff into the earth, shouting words that burned in the air like fire. Light shot up around him, brilliant, golden. The spirit gate had opened. And then, he fell. His body crumpled like dry leaves. His eyes remained open, but his soul had already stepped through. No! Ebony cried, rushing to his side. But the light he had summoned now swirled around the binding stone, dancing like fireflies made of memory. The trees began to hum. The ground beneath them throbbed with power. Now, the old Seko cried in unison. Say the name. Be the truth. Ebony stumbled to the stone. Nuru was coming. Her coils tore through the grove, uprooting trees. She roared, not in fear, but fury. You think you can bind me again, she hissed. I have waited centuries. I have returned stronger. Ebony raised the knife. She remembered her grandmother's voice, when the earth is sick, it sends you dreams. Listen. She whispered, Ebo. The true name of the land. Then she sliced her palm. Blood touched the binding stone. And the world shook. The ground cracked beneath their feet. The trees bowed. The stone lit up, not blue, not red, but gold. Bright as the first sunrise. Nuru screamed. Her body twisted, fighting the pull. She lunged toward Ebony, her jaws wide, fangs gleaming. She caught Ebony in her coils, squeezing. Harder. Harder. Ebony couldn't breathe. She gasped, the world fading. But then, the stone roared. A beam of light erupted upward, striking Nuru's chest. Her scream shook the heavens. The villagers watched in horror and awe as her coils froze mid-strike, her face contorted in rage, and then... Stone. Smooth. Cold. Grey. Nuru's form turned to rock, a massive serpent frozen mid-snarl, her body coiled forever around the base of the binding stone. The grove fell silent. Ebony collapsed to the ground, barely breathing, her body trembling. But she was alive. And so was the village, the curse beneath our feet. The serpent was gone. Or so they said. The village of Doma had returned to quiet, though never quite the same quiet it had known before the night of the blue fire moon. The crops had begun to grow again, timid green shoots pushing through wounded soil. The birds sang, but with a note of caution. The river flowed once more, but its water no longer sparkled like it once had. At the edge of the sacred grove, wrapped forever around the binding stone, stood the statue of Niru, a towering serpent caught mid-strike, her face frozen in eternal rage. The villagers avoided it. They whispered prayers when passing nearby, but no one dared speak her name out loud. Except for Ebony. Now older, though not yet old, she wore the cloak of an elder in training. Her voice carried weight. Her eyes carried memory. The children sat around her under the ancient baobab, the same tree where Elder Zimo once told stories, his cane tapping gently against the roots. Zimo was gone now, his staff buried beside the binding stone, but his teachings lived on in Ebony. Long ago, she began, a woman came from the river. Beautiful, powerful, and kind. But beneath her smile lived the secret, a hunger as old as the bones of the earth. The children leaned closer, eyes wide. She was not just evil, Ebony said. She was truth in disguise. A spirit of nature. A warning wrapped in beauty. Did she really turn into a snake? Little Kemi asked, clutching her knees to her chest. Ebony smiled softly. She always was a snake. But we only saw what we wanted to see. As the sun dipped below the trees, and the stars blinked into being like ancestral eyes, Ebony sat alone beside the statue. She often came here in the quiet hours. Sometimes to think. Sometimes to listen. The stone was cracked now, hairline fractures along Niru's face and coils. Nothing dramatic. Nothing urgent. But Ebony noticed. She always noticed. She had dreams now, too. Dreams of roots moving beneath the soil, of eyes watching from cracks in the ground, of other creatures, not just serpents, rising and falling with the breath of the earth. The dreams came more often lately. Sometimes, she dreamed of a woman made of wind, or a boy with hooves instead of feet. Once, she saw a flame that whispered like a mother, but burned like a curse. One night, as the wind howled through the trees like a restless spirit, Ebony awoke to find Kemi standing at her doorway. The girl's eyes were heavy with sleep, but she was smiling. I heard her, Kemi whispered. Ebony rose slowly. Heard who, child? The one in the stone. She called to me. Ebony's stomach turned, but she kept her voice calm. What did she say? She said, the world forgets too easily. Come listen. Come learn. Kemi tilted her head. She doesn't sound angry. She sounds lonely. Ebony's heart thudded. I'll go with you in the morning, she said gently, placing a hand on Kemi's shoulder. Kemi just smiled, and turned away, her feet soft on the path. But she didn't wait for morning. When the village stirred the next day, Kemi was gone. Ebony followed her footprints, small, barefoot, determined, into the forest. Past the river. Past the roots that pulsed with old life. Deeper into the trees where the earth hummed a low, familiar hiss. She found Kemi standing at the edge of the grove, her hands outstretched. The girl looked back at Ebony, smiling with the same calm Niru once wore. I hear them, she said. And just as the wind picked up, rustling the trees in a serpentine rhythm, Ebony noticed something else. The statue of Niru was weeping. Only a drop, barely noticeable. But the stone did not cry. And yet, here they were. As the sky darkened and the village lights flickered on, Ebony looked at Kemi and knew. This was not the end. It was only the next beginning. The serpent had not been slain. She had been understood. Contained, perhaps. But never erased. Evil may return in new skin, Ebony told the children in the days that followed. But knowledge, courage, and unity will always be our strongest shield. The serpent is part of us now, not our enemy, but our reminder. Of what we must never forget, ***. The end.